G. Edward Griffin is our guest with us till about 45 minutes into the next hour. Your phone calls are coming up. Okay, G. Edward, you got to the point of domestication. And literally, we have hundreds of textbooks, thousands of white papers, congressional reports, the foundations themselves, scientific dictatorship, global government to carry out a global police state. That's their quotes. To force one-child policy, sterilization, eugenics, mainstream news reporting. The elite are obsessed with this. These are very, very greedy people. They want the life extension technologies. They want the cancer cures for themselves. They want total control. They want it now. So now Al Gore admits his new movie's about how it's a religion, how the environment's a religion. They always plan to have the UN religion. It's all now happening. Please continue.
Well, yes, and just before the break, we were talking about the strategy, the fact that this is not an accident. This is not new. This is the foundation for this was laid in strategic form, at the turn of the last century. But we were talking about Norman Dodd. I keep coming back to him because I think there's so much to be learned from his testimony. And basically, when he went and he talked to the head of the Ford Foundation, there's a guy by the name of Gaither, I think was his name. And he said, Mr. Gaither, I would like very much to know what you folks are doing here. And he said, without any hesitation, Gaither said, well, Mr. Dodd, I can tell you exactly what we're doing here. He said, we are putting our resources to work so as to change the United States of America so it can be comfortably merged with the Soviet Union. Those were his exact words. And Dodd said he almost fell off of his chair when he heard that. And he said it wasn't just the Soviet Union, it wasn't that it was communism that they wanted, but the fact was if you could merge the United States with the Soviet Union, which was at the opposite end, people thought, of the political spectrum, well, you could merge it with any nation. And that was the real goal, because they were trying to set up a merger process in which the United States would be merged with the Soviet Union, Red China, France, England, Germany, the world. And he said, well, how can you do that? And he got the answer when he visited the offices of the Carnegie Endowment Fund for International Peace. He said, you can take a look at our minute books, and you can see what we do here. And the answer came, here's the answer, the strategy that I'm finally building to. They said, the American people will never surrender their affinity to their legal system, their customs, their traditions, none of that. The people in America are different, and they'll never give up any of that unless they're frightened into it. If they thought that it was necessary in order to survive, then they will give up everything, because survival is the most basic instinct of all human beings. And so therefore, if you're going to change life in the United States so it can be comfortably merged with the Soviet Union and any other totalitarian system in the world, you must make the United States a totalitarian system. And the way to do that is to scare the people by getting them embroiled into wars. And this is the amazing part. The Carnegie Endowment Fund for Peace then plotted to get the United States into World War I and to prolong it. And they said, if you can get the American people into war and be afraid of their survival, they will accept a totalitarian government.
So let's be clear. It is on record, in the congressional record, the foundations admit they started World War I and World War II to get the UN and the world government. They are the warmongers. Now, into the fourth and final hour, G. Edward Griffin is our guest. Thank you for joining us. He's breaking down the embryonic development of this world government that is to be captained and controlled and piloted by a handful of ultra-rich elite families intermarried with the royalty of Europe. The Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, all the usual names. And you could ignore G. Edward Griffin 30, 40, 50 years ago when he had all the documents. People can say, I'm not going to look at those. But now it's openly being announced. G. Edward Griffin, please continue, and then let's get into why they're now announcing it, what that means in the current situation. What does it signify that they're now emerging and admitting that it's going to be a private world government that has complete control over every facet of our lives, no Bill of Rights, no Constitution, no parental rights, children to be raised in government dormitories. I mean, just hell is being announced.
Well, my initial reaction to that question is not a very optimistic reaction. I think, honestly, that they feel that it's so close now that you need to talk about it and condition the American mind into accepting it as a reality. There comes a point when you say, hey, here it is, get used to it. And I think they've come to that phase in the historical development that they're telling us just to get used to it. Also, I think it's partly because after all of these years, very few people are indignant about it anymore. I mean, there was a time 20, 30, 40 years ago when the mere mention of what's happening today as a possibility, you'd probably not just be laughed down, but you'd probably be you'd be squirted with tars and feathers because it would sound like you were speaking against America. You know, people did not want to hear that. That's absurd. Does not consider it, and so forth. Well, now people say, "Oh yeah, well we all know that. We've had to give up our freedom in order to protect ourselves against the Nazis in World War II, and now we've had to give up more freedom to protect ourselves against the terrorists in World War III. And yes, we have to give up our freedom to protect ourselves against swine flu, and we have to give up our freedom in order to protect ourselves against an economic collapse." And all that formula that they talked about in those days keeps coming to haunt us. Is that everybody is afraid of this, that, and the other thing, and each time they think about their fear, they give up more freedom, and so now they're kind of conditioned to this idea. Well, yeah, we did that. We did it consciously, and here we are, and now what's next? I think more people are more concerned today with knowing what's next than being indignant about what's now.
There's a capitulation, a broke-backed, just giving in to whatever happens and really going along with it. But there is a larger and larger minority that is awake and is upset. But going back to what you said before the break, that in their own documents, and I had a high school teacher that talked about this, in their own Carnegie documents, clearly that's one of the central foundations, the center of the spoke for the Rockefeller Foundation. From all my research, you can add to that if you'd like. But that they created these wars and financed the boogeymen, the Saddam Husseins, the Bin Ladens, the Hitlers, the Mussolinis, the Lenins. And it's in mainline history, but just not popularly advertised that this is what they did. And now they're making humanity the enemy, as the CFR and Club of Rome documents have stated in the last 10 years. They openly admit the environmental movement's fake. They openly admit that that's a pretext to make everyone an enemy, everyone someone bad that the government has to come after, and that terrorism makes everyone a potential enemy, and the flu, anyone could have it. So, I mean, this is tyranny. This is how America dies.
Well, there's no question about it. I guess I haven't seen them openly admit this so much, but they certainly are talking about it as though it's a fait accompli. It's already here, so we don't have to sell anybody on the idea. Hey, it's already happened, folks. You know, get used to it. I think.
What do you mean you don't see them openly? I mean, CFR reports Ban Ki-moon in the New York Times 2 weeks ago saying global government. Al Gore saying global government, saying that the IMF will be the new bank of the world we pay carbon taxes to?
Oh, no, I see that, but what I don't see is them admitting that they're using deceit and trickery. They're still keeping that pretty much under wraps.